You're listening to the How to Get Over Your Ex podcast, episode number 139, How to Help Your Kids During Heartbreak. Welcome to How to Get Over Your Ex, a podcast on getting over your ex without it just taking time. I'm your host, breakup coach Dorothy. Let's turn your pain into power and your heartbreak into happy. Hello, my beautiful, beautiful brave hearts. How is everyone doing? I am so excited to do this episode. This is an episode that was actually requested by a listener who reached out to me via Instagram and very much wanted more information about how to help her children who also, of course, are experiencing heartbreak in this specific setting when she was going through her breakup. And she provided me some questions. And then I asked all of my listeners that are following me on Instagram, I asked for more questions or different topics that you'd like me to cover. And I thought what would be a really good idea is to do a couple of things. We're doing this podcast today where I brought in an expert who helps teens going through and using the tools that I use with a lot of my clients. She's certified at the Life Coach School as well. So we teach a lot of the same kind of tools and techniques. And then I also will have some brave hearts who have already gone through the Get Over Your Ex program come on after I speak with the expert, and they'll be giving you some tangible tools around what they've done with their children in a variety of age settings, because I know it might be different based off of how old your child is. And so they'll be giving you more practical how-tos that will be very beneficial for anyone listening today. And then I'm really excited because this needs to be a more permanent part of the program as well. So this will be great. I'm so excited. Thank you so much, Sammy, for coming on. I really, really appreciate your help. I appreciate your insights, everything you're going to provide to the listeners today. So let's go ahead and get started. Why don't you just tell me a little bit about who you are, where you are, what you do, how you came into doing what you do? Can you tell us all the things about you?
Sure. Yeah. I love that you refer to me as an expert.
Yes.
I do. So I work with teens, mainly teen girls, but I work with teen boys also. And I run programs for them to build their self-confidence. And a lot of that comes from the anxiety that teens are feeling these days. And just there's so much anxiety, so much depression right now with our teens that I teach them how to be self-confident, and self-confidence, it's really the antidote to anxiety. And so that is what I do. I have a podcast, the Teen Life Coach podcast. If anybody wants to go listen to that, or send their teens to that. I just teach a lot of the same things that you teach. It's worded differently for teens. You kind of have to say it a little bit different. So I've been doing this for maybe 3 years. I grew up as a teen and I struggled with anxiety and depression, and I didn't even have social media back then. And so these are kind of the things where I was like, and then obviously I have 4 kids now. And as my girls are growing up, I'm watching them and they have their own struggles. And I'm like, we have to teach our kids and our teens how to love themselves. That's something that's not taught, and self-confident isn't something that's taught. It's easy to tell somebody, hey, yeah, well, just love yourself and be confident. But what does that actually look like inside our brains? And I want my girls to grow up differently than I did. And I want them to have the tools and these life coaching topics and procedures to go through to help them, navigate, because even when I grew up, I was like, this is really hard. And I know it's like so much harder now. And the teens are experiencing a lot of things. Like you said, sometimes as a kid, the first heartbreak you do have, that is the heartbreak of your parents splitting up. And as a young child or as a teenager, we don't know how to navigate that. I mean, even think as an adult, it's your if you're getting divorced, like maybe you've never been divorced before and you don't know how to navigate it. And so a lot of it is really just teaching the kids how to change their brains, how to feel confident, even though there's so many circumstances and situations that are going on around them in life that you cannot change. And so giving them the tools and the experiences and exposures to be able to still love themselves no matter what's going on outside of them, which I think we all know is very hard.
Yeah, I'm like resonating so much with this one because, and I think about like, I grew up with a psychologist for a dad, and the way like the disciplinary things that took place were very different than the things that my friends had to go through. And even with that, I think I had a great upbringing, even with someone who has so much knowledge in psychology, it was fascinating to me that I went through my upbringing with a psychologist. I went to undergrad for psychology. I got my master's in IO Psych. And it wasn't until I was done with all of that and I listened to Brooke Castillo on the Life Coach School that I learned that thoughts created feelings. Mm-hmm. Just for it to be said so bluntly. Like, I think obviously I learned a lot of concepts about it, but no one ever just said it bluntly like that to me. Yeah. And it's just, even just that pure awareness for me, I wonder what might've been different and maybe my dad did say it to me and I just didn't even hear it. That could totally have been a thing. But I think if I would have learned how to process emotion when I was younger, I think that would have changed the game for me. I just find it so cool that like, at least when I don't help teens, I help a lot of people who are maybe around 18, 19, but I don't take on anyone who's younger than 18 typically. And when they're learning how to process emotion and not react to the immediate, like panicked emotions that we can get so quickly, it's such a cool thing to know that they're going to have that for the rest of their life and their entire trajectory might be different because of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
So cool.
And I say, like, I didn't learn this work until I was in my 30s. Like, it took me to get to my 30s to actually figure out how to love myself. And like I said, I had like anxiety and depression growing up. And then, like in my 20s, my sister passed away. I got married. My first baby was stillborn. And so just learning how to process through even that emotion, where there's so many things that are out of your circumstance or out of your control, and you don't know what to do, right? And I feel like that's happening to our teens that are growing up now, is like you cannot control so many things, and learning how to process through that emotion. I learned it in my 30s, but I wish I had it so much younger.
Yeah, it's so cool. Okay. So let's dive in because we have so much to talk about. Yeah. And my Bravehearts want help. They want to know how to help their children through what they might be experiencing. And like I said, after this particular situation where you and I are recording, I've already recorded one episode with a Braveheart about this specific topic of like helping her kids. And what was really cool about what she mentioned is she mentioned that a lot of it came down to the work that she did herself to not react to her emotions when her kids would say certain things or do certain things that were really hard for her to hear, or like they would be honest about what's happening with their ex when they're with them. And she would have a lot of emotion about it. And just by being able to like handle her own emotions, that of course helped her children. But I want to take this a little bit deeper and I want to take this a little bit further. And so I have a series of questions here that the Bravehearts asked, and I'm going to kind of walk through them one by one to make sure that they get those questions asked. However, I'll probably follow up. I always have follow-up questions. So I'll probably ask you more and more, but let's start with just how can we help children, and remember of like all ages maybe, process change?
So I'm just going to use the term divorce, and that's going to be very, very loose across the board. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's typically the client that I work with is the teens whose parents are getting a divorce. And that's just for clarification's sake. But I would say the most important thing to help your child or teen or whatever age they are is to get them into counseling, get them therapy, get them somebody that they can talk to. They need a safe place. Kids need to be able to take vocabulary and put it to what they're feeling. And a lot of times they don't have words for what they're feeling and what they're going through. And being able to meet with somebody and talk with somebody and give what's going on inside their brain and their heart words, that is so powerful and helping to just calm down those intense emotions. And a lot of times we call it like name it to tame it, where if they can just understand what they're feeling and give it an actual word or a label, and it decreases the emotion by 50%. And so whether it's getting them into counseling or a coach or something like that, they need somewhere where they can learn about what is going on inside their body and what is going on inside their brain. And emotions, it's like emotion coaching. It's what we do. It's what we do as life coaches also. But emotions, they don't discriminate. Right? We feel all sorts of emotions, and kids feel all the emotions too. They just don't understand, or they don't know what it is. And I mean, like, as we experienced on Sunday night, Will Smith experiences emotions too, right? And we're not always allowed, and there's not always the most appropriate ways to act out on our emotions. And so that is a learning process also. But there needs to be some guidance for any child or any teen that is going through a divorce, whether, it's a trusted family member or a counselor or somebody else. But it's really, really hard to navigate that without somebody or a safe place where they can try to figure out what is going on and why they're feeling the way that they're feeling.
I love that. So quick question, and this is coming from a non-parent. I have fur babies, but I don't have human babies. So you're going to have to bear with me. But I can just see myself being like, okay, cool. But can I be that trusted safe space for them? Like, can I be the person they talk to about that? Or do you really think it's like really important that they have like an objective standpoint that's not the mom or the dad or the two parents?
Yeah, I think it needs to be another party.
Okay.
Definitely. Because objectively, like, it's really hard to be that place for your kid because you already have preconceived notions, you already have your own thoughts about the situation. It's just kind of like if I were to go and coach like my best friend on her breakup, I totally wouldn't be able to coach her fairly because I already don't like the guy that's breaking up with her, right? So my coaching is not going to come from a clean place. And as a parent, it's really, really hard to coach your child from a very clean place.
Because you're like, oh my God, I love this person. I don't want them to experience anything bad, like all the things.
Absolutely. And we'll get into that later. But my personal opinion is that it needs to be somebody else.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool. So then what about, what do you do when your child is constantly asking to go back to live with the other person? Okay. So this person has like a child who's younger, and the child keeps asking to go back to his or her father's. Like, how would you handle that?
Yeah. So I think the most important thing here as a parent is to really get curious. And a lot of times we forget to be curious as parents because we just like, okay, automatically, what do we make that mean about us that the child wants to go back and live with dad, or stay with dad or whatever. But I think the most important thing you can do so many times as a parent is get curious and ask, okay, tell me why, tell me more about this. Okay. Tell me what's going on inside your brain. Okay. With kids and teens that I work with, a lot of times it's like, I'll just tell you the thoughts that I hear from the kids that I work with is like, I'm worried about that other parent, or nobody's taking care of them and they're alone. I don't want them to be alone. I need to make sure
Mm.
that they get dinner, or they're sad. I need to be with them because they're sad, right? There's so many reasons of why that child could be wanting or feeling like they need to go be with the other parent, that I think that if we can understand that, we can have more compassion for that kind of like intense need where they feel like they need to be over there. And it may just be because the other parent lets them play video games all the time. We don't know, but I think it's so important to get curious and honor the responses. If they give you responses, to honor that and be compassionate towards that and be understanding.
And one thing I'm thinking about too, as you say all of that, is like not get reactive in the midst of that. When you said honor their response, I'm like, I feel like as a child, I learned how to shut down and only give my parents answers they wanted to hear, because I would say something that felt honest to me and then it was rejected. And so I like learned an automatic default response is to say what I think they want to hear from me. And so what do you say about that? Like, what are your thoughts about that? How can parents make sure they don't do that?
Yeah, well, and that comes from the parents just providing a safe, open space where we're validating, we're empathizing, we're not trying to change their emotions, we're not judging our kids based on their emotions, right? Where home is a place where you can walk in this door and feel anything that you want to feel, right?
Mm.
And I'm not going to judge you, right? If you want to feel jealous, come on in and feel jealous. If you want to feel sad, any emotion is okay here in this house, right?
And I think of any thought pattern. I'm like, bring it to me. Bring all the thought patterns to me and like, let's look at it. Like, where is that coming from? Is it a real thought pattern? I mean, I already can tell I'm probably going to end up coaching my kid when I'm not welcome to coach the kid. It's already just tell, but I'm like, I want to know why. So good. So
But
good.
yeah, just teaching them and being an example for them that, there's nothing off limits,
Mm-hmm.
right? And really trying hard not, well, why are you feeling this way, or why are you thinking that, right? Like those are some of the questions where when we say them in a certain way, it tends to just shut kids down, and or like, you don't really think that, do you? And
Ooh, that's a good one. I've heard that one.
yeah, well, I just remember it being said to me. My mom was like, "You don't really like him, do you?" And I was like, "Oh, yes, I do, but no, mom, I don't like him at all."
Right? And then
Right,
it's almost like we were trained, like, at least for me at some points, I'm like, I was trained to lie. It's like, if I tell you the truth, bad things happen.
right, exactly. And so I think curiosity is such a good neutral emotion where you're trying to understand. And I think once as a parent, we have some understanding of what is going on in our kids' brains, like that alarm in our own head starts to calm down, where it's like, it's not about us. It's not something that I did wrong. It's not because they hate me. It's not because they don't want to be with me. It's not because I'm a bad mom. Whatever your alarm is going on in your brain telling you, right? It's really that, maybe the child is worried about the other parent,
Mhm.
or worried about their goldfish at the other house, or it could be so many things. And as a parent, typically I want to say it's probably not about you. Right?
Yeah. And even if they said it's about you, I question that. Like, even if a kid's like, oh, because I have more fun with dad, or I have more fun with my other parent, it's still not about you. It's about their thoughts that they have that create the fun for them.
Or the
Um,
chips that dad has at his house, like
mhm.
he likes the chips, it has nothing to do with you.
So good. So good. Oh, I love that. Okay. So then we're kind of talking a little bit about this, but let's get more specific. What about emotional turmoil? How can we help kids through emotional turmoil? Because I feel like during separations, there's a lot of ups and downs for the parent. Do the kids feel the ups and downs as well?
Oh yeah, for sure. And so this also kind of has to deal with like counseling is really important, therapy is really important. And it also goes back to um emotional turmoil. When we like break it down, emotions are emotions, right? They're not problems to be solved. And any emotion is allowed in your home. And if your child is feeling angry, it's okay to feel angry. And they're just processing anger. And you don't always need to do anything about it, right? It's hard to like not jump in and be like, stop crying, or like just go to your room. But like they're processing their emotions in the best way that they know how to, and allowing them the space to do that is the best thing that you can possibly do. Um, Kind of like, I don't, well, I know you don't have kids, but it's like if you take a kid to the doctor and they're like about to get their shots, and the kids like really scared and they're kind of like freaking out, and they're like they might cry a little bit, and I don't the say like the dad or the mom's like you're tough, you don't need to cry, like be brave, like and then it's like no, crying is a normal response to pain. And that
This
is,
is so good.
and
As
that
you're
is
saying all of this, I'm like, what if they're the ones doing it right and you're the one doing it wrong?
exactly right. Crying is a normal response to pain. Okay.
Yeah, it's almost like, oh my God, the emotional turmoil is actually what you should be doing and not trying to have your kids not have emotional turmoil.
Yeah. Like that is them processing through their emotions, right? It's like that's them feeling their emotions. They're doing what we're supposed to be doing. And then in like 10 minutes, they're going to be totally fine, right?
I love you so much right now for saying all of this. This is so good. So good.
Kid like throw a tantrum and like in like 10 minutes, like he'll be asleep in his car seat with a sucker in his mouth, and like there's not even a problem in the world, right? He
Yeah.
processed through his emotions, he is good, he is happy, he is ready to move on.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. I really love that you brought that back to like, oh, what it well, and I love Dr. Joe Dispenza's definition of an emotion where it's energy in motion. And kids are better, I think, at putting the energy to motion, allowing it to move in motion in your body and releasing it through crying, screaming, tantrums. Um, so that's a beautiful way to put that. I love that.
I don't know at what point we started being like, don't show emotion, don't cry, like as adults. And then we're raising our kids to be like, it's not normal to feel any emotion, right? And that's where anxiety comes in. So it's like if we're embarrassed or something, we're like, oh my gosh, what's this emotion that I'm feeling? Like something is wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
When in actuality, it's like nothing's wrong with you. That's a normal human emotion that you should be feeling right now.
It's a normal response, kind of like how you were saying crying is a normal response to pain. Um, Embarrassment would be a normal response to rejection or something, or like, yeah, I think that's a really great way to put it. And I feel like for me, I'm like thinking back, when did that happen for me? And I feel like it happened in school, like early school days, where if you cried in class, like kids would make fun of you. Um, or if something happened and you had like a physical reaction to an emotion, I was, at least I remember being made fun of. And so I feel like that's where I stopped allowing myself to feel and experience emotion.
Yeah, you get called a crybaby at
And
school.
then you would hide it, right? And then it's only perpetuated in the adult world, like at work. I was actually, I was categorized as a very emotional person at my data analytics consulting job because I would cry in my meetings with my boss. But it's like literally like frowned upon to have any emotions at work. So that's really fascinating.
Frowned upon having emotions. My 7-year-old will like, he gets really upset sometimes and like he gets angry and like he'll go into his room, like I send him in his room and he'll like throw stuff and yell, and like my older girls will come to me and like, Mom, what's Bruin doing in his room? And I'm like, he's just processing anger right now. It's like not a big deal. And they're like, aren't you gonna do anything? And I'm like, no, like he's totally fine. He gets angry, it's okay. In 10 minutes, he's gonna come out and like be the happiest kid on the planet.
I
Right?
love that. So good. Ah, what a beautiful new way of parenting, you guys. I'm
Send
obsessed
them in
with
your room. Make sure they don't break anything.
it. Too good. Too good. Okay. So what is your thoughts or your opinion around different ages? Like how do you handle the different age groups for children when it comes to going through heartbreak? Do you think it's different?
Well, I think like so one thing that I would worry about is for teens, what they do a lot of times in dealing with emotions is they avoid situations. They do a lot of avoidance, they do a lot of distraction, and they do a lot of isolation. And so I would just be, for kids that are older in their teens, I would look for some warning signs, right? Like if your teen is, if their grades are dropping, maybe if they're getting into drugs, if they're not talking to you, like if you don't see them a lot. A lot of times, changes in our lives like divorce can cause some trauma for kids, and they again don't know how to handle it and deal with it. So if you see any of the warning signs, I would definitely be aware of kind of what to look for. And I think it's really important to have your teen screened or have your teen be meeting with somebody. And sometimes it even helps to have the whole family go to counseling. And I get so concerned about teen mental health that any big changes in their lives, like they're already susceptible with their developing brains to mental illness without, with like a normal teen life. And so when we introduce these other changes into their lives, sometimes it can be detrimental to their mental health. And so I always say, hey, just make sure you don't see any of those warning signs. Make sure that they're still talking to you. Make sure that they're, doing their homework. They're doing the social activities that they still love. They're with their friends. They're not spending hours in their room, hours on their phone every day. So for teens, I always like to tell people, just be aware of kind of what their actions are and check in on them.
I love that. And that kind of leads us into another question that came up was around feeling selfish and maybe even guilty that, sometimes you might be the person being like, I want a divorce, I want to break up. And that's going to impact their children's lives, kind of like you're talking about. It might stir some stuff up for their children. So what do you do in that kind of situation? And then we can even take it a step further because this person who asked this question mentioned that they come from a very religious background. So what they're doing is actually considered a sin or bad or wrong. And how do you handle that?
Yeah. So I think that, well, there's a few things here, but the first is whenever there's like perceived condemnation or perceived judgment, or even if there is any real judgment, or maybe people say things or whatever, whenever we put like shame in the model into the feeling line, nothing good ever comes from shame. And so I think that it's important to understand and to remember that feeling, whether you feel it because of your judgments of yourself or whether you're feeling it because of the judgments that you think other people are having on you, or maybe we even know maybe even we even know what their judgments are of us, that feeling, that emotion, it never leads to being a good parent, right? When we feel shame, we take that out on our kids, and we parent our kids completely differently than when we feel confident or love for ourselves or compassion for ourselves. And so I think even just handling our own emotions, that's totally going to affect how we show up as a parent. The other part of this is, with so many parents that I work with, there's anxiety because there's uncertainty about the future, about how their kids are going to be, like what's going to happen to them. And that causes so much anxiety as a parent, like just not knowing, like, because of this situation, is my child going to be okay? Right. And so I kind of like to say, okay, if we just stop for a moment, and if we knew that your kid was going to be okay, like, let's take care of the future right now and just say your kid's going to be okay. And you can even define what okay is, right? I don't know what okay is. Like, they graduate from high school, they get into college, whatever. My okay for my kids is that they don't, this is so funny, they don't end up in a drug rehab. Like, if my kids don't end up in drug rehab, they're okay, right? I have really high expectations for them. But we have a lot of drug addicts on my side of the family. So anyways, but you can define what okay is. And then if you can just come to that place where, okay, the future's taken care of. This kid is going to be okay. They're going to be stronger for what they're going through, right? Then from that place, how do I parent now, right? Like if I knew that they were just going to be taken care of in the future, what would I do now in this instant, right now, to enjoy them, to love them, to be present with them? And you find that you show up as a completely different parent if you know that your child's going to be okay. Like, because of this change in their life, they're going to be okay, right? How do I love them? How do I support them now?
I am obsessed with that, because as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about my experience. I love that I'm taking all of this and like looking back at my childhood with it. So I'm really glad. I don't think my parents listen to my podcast, so this is really good.
Okay.
So my parents, they, if I'm being honest, I'm like, they should have definitely separated way sooner than they did. But even though they didn't, I'm still okay. I am not in drug rehab, which is great. I graduated my things. Great. I have a job. It's great. And so I feel like it's so fascinating when I am coaching my clients on stuff like this, and they're like, it's detrimental to my children that I'm going through a divorce, or that I'm breaking. And I'm like, but you're doing what is right for you, and you're showing them what is possible. If they were in a relationship that they weren't happy with, would you tell them to stay? Like, would you want that for them? Or if they were in a abusive relationship, physical or verbal, would you tell them to stay for their children? I don't know. Like, and I'm a huge advocate of there's no right or wrong answers here, but it's just, I have a lot of clients do this probably because I do this, but I constantly am like, what would I tell Marilyn to do? My baby Marilyn, that's hypothetical, not born yet. I'm not pregnant yet.
Okay.
She's coming. I feel it. I'm always like, what would I tell baby Marilyn to do? And then I do that.
Yeah.
So good. I love it.
You're
Go ahead.
setting an example for your kids of, sometimes having boundaries for yourself in a situation doesn't mean that you don't love your kids.
Right. Beautiful. And it doesn't mean that you're selfish.
Right. Yeah. I do like want to share a few things with you, kind of I think it's helpful to your listeners.
Yeah, please do.
To hear some of the thoughts of the teens that I work with.
Oh my God, this is gonna be so good. I'm so excited. Thank you.
When I'm coaching them, and when they're dealing with the anxiety of, you know, their parents splitting. So I just kind of wrote some of them down for you. But like when I hear these, it just gives me compassion for the teens and for the kids, right? And I think that as parents, like, if we actually knew what was going on inside our kids and our teens' brains, we would be so compassionate and loving towards them, right? If they just like let us open their brains and look at them and be like, oh, okay, I totally get it, right?
I so agree. I mean, I don't have kids, but I agree. I think that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I had to mute myself because I keep talking and I want to hear this list of thoughts. This is going to be so
Okay.
good.
Okay, so one thing that I run into is the teens, they feel responsible for making sure that their parents get along. Like that is their responsibility, and they are like the mediator between both parties. And that is a big responsibility to put on a teen or a kid.
So much pressure. I had that thought. I totally had that thought. Mhm.
There's a lot of anxiety when parents fight, and the kids feeling like it's my fault. They're fighting because of me. They're fighting over me. If like I didn't exist, there wouldn't be this problem. Right?
Hard one. Mm-hmm.
Feeling like they have to keep quiet what happens at another parent's house, right? Where they never feel like they can really be themselves because they are trying to keep that other part of their life separate and quiet and not say the wrong thing, or like make a mistake in what they do or what they say because it might make the other parent upset. Right. So there's a lot of anxiety in that sort of situation where you feel like you're one way on the inside, but then you can't really be that way on the outside because of what the consequence might be. Right. There's a lot of anxiety with the teens that I work with when like the parents text and say like one parent's running like 5 minutes late, and then the other parent will be upset. And that kind of goes along with like fighting and stuff. I do want to mention a little thing about that when we're done. One other thing is they feel like they have to stick up for the other parent, right? When if they're at one parent's house and there's some conversations going on, they feel like they need to stick up for the other parent or advocate for the other parent, and that's not always welcome. And then another one is like knowing who to believe, right? They don't know who to believe. And just like being in that sort of situation where you're like, the truth of things and what's going on around you in your life, like that causes a lot of anxiety too, and a lot of self-confidence issues. And teens also take this situation in their lives and they're like, what is this? Because this situation is happening, what does it mean about me? Right? Like, am I not good enough? Am I not worth them staying together? You know, all those thoughts about their self-worth and those kind of things too. That's like a whole other level or a whole other topic. But I just think it provides some compassion and some understanding for parents who are listening. Is like, these are the things that are going through your kids' minds. And it's not really about you. It's not that you're a bad parent. It's not that you're a bad mom. It's not that you're a bad dad, right? These kids are having their own thoughts and their own feelings about these things because they're confused and they don't know how to navigate it either.
That's so good. I mean, all of those just ring so true. I can so hear that in so many individuals' minds, as at least like I had them at times in my life.
The thing is teens don't know they're having these, right?
Right. And it's all, yeah. And I think the whole truth one, I went and saw my brother in California last week, and we talked so much about this, about how he was hearing one thing and I was hearing a different thing. And he innately he totally believed all the things that were being said and I didn't. He was younger than me at the time. And I was a little bit more developed in that I was like making my own, only because I was older. Like he was younger. I was like almost 18, 19. And I was just then learning that I could like form my own opinions. So it's so wild that you say that. So good.
And when you're younger, it's like you look to your parents to figure out how to feel. Right?
Yeah.
We mimic our parents' emotions. Like, for example, just like with COVID, if your parent was like freaking out about COVID and like having so much anxiety about COVID and like wash your hands and mask and all that, you would see that in the kids.
Yeah.
And so as a kid, you are so affected by the emotions of your parents. That's who you look to figure out, okay, how do I handle this situation? How do I act? And sometimes it's just not such a simple answer.
Yeah. No, I love that. So I'm also like, from everything you're saying, it sounds like fostering an environment of curiosity and compassion would be most ideal. Like if we're taking one whole kind of takeaway, it's almost like fostering an environment of curiosity and compassion and allowing them to process their emotions is like some of the best things that you could do for your children during this time.
Yeah. And I have one more to add to that.
Please do.
I think it's also important that you foster an environment of respect for the other parent. I think that is just with their self-worth. I think that's important for any teen to have you respect the other parent. And even if that other parent gets a girlfriend or anything, it's like call the girlfriend by her name, not the other woman, or even the way that you say her name, like Crystal, but be respectful and use her name the right way, or like bozo boy, don't like call the other man like bozo boy, but just like being respectful of that other parent and of that other parent's other partner or whatever around your kid. Like you can go to therapy and you can totally talk trash about that other partner or whatever, say what you need to say in therapy. Keep those things in therapy that need to be kept in therapy.
Keep those things and get over your ex, you guys. That's the shit. I shouldn't say the S word, but that's the stuff that we cover. And get over your ex. You can get over that in your own program.
You need to see Dorothy for all those things and tell Dorothy all of those things. But
I can help you handle that.
When it comes to being around your kids, like it's important and affects them and how you respond to the other parent, or the way that you talk about them, or the way that you treat them or refer to their other partner. I mean, I think a lot of times we as parents, we don't realize that our kids are affected by what we do, and they're not like listening, or we like don't think that they're paying any attention, but they're paying attention.
Oh, so good. This is so helpful. Thank you so much, Sammy, for giving us some insight into how to handle this differently for our kids and how we can best help them. I think that's amazing. Is there anything else that you wanted to share? Any last bits that we haven't covered?
I guess the final thing I could say is like, I know what it's like to be a parent. I know it's so hard, and we make mistakes, and you're not going to be a perfect parent. Right? And I think it's okay to show your kids that you make mistakes and that you're not perfect either, and that you love them. I think that's the most important thing, is to just love them where they're at, whatever emotion they're feeling. Just love them where they're at. What are you going to regret later on? Are you going to regret letting your kid feel angry? Or are you going to regret like yelling at them and telling them to be quiet? Right? Like I always love that question. You know, what will I regret later on?
Yeah. Beautiful.
From that place is a good place to parent from.
I love that. Thank you so much. How can people find you if they're looking for a coach for their teen? Please share how they can find you and your other resources you might have.
Yeah, so my website is knowingup.com, kind of like growingup.com. But yeah, we work on brains in my programs, and you can find me there. You can email me, Sammy at knowingup.com. I'm on Instagram at the Teen Life Coach Podcast. And then also, yeah, I mentioned my podcast. I love working with the teens. It brings me so much joy and so much happiness. And I love like watching their brains change and their minds be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that my world could be like this. Right. And so it's so rewarding and so fun. And yeah, that's
I
me.
love
That's what
that.
you can find me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time, my brave hearts. I know they appreciate your time. Thank you for all of your knowledge and your expertise. And we will talk to you again later.
All right, thanks for having me.
Bye. If you're loving the How to Get Over Your Ex podcast and you want to learn how to get over your ex in 3 months or less to build a life better than the one you thought you had with your ex, I would like to personally invite you to my next group course where we take everything you've learned here on the podcast and apply it to your life. Come check it out at www.lifecoachdorothy.com.